Hello everyone, I'm Quinn Yuan, and this is my presentation of my final research project. Uh, h- Today's topic is how Windows Credential Guard protects the logon credentials. In many real-world attacks, attackers don't break passwords. Instead, they steal the authentication material from memory after a user logs in, and reuse it to remove the laterally or escalate privileges. So the key problem is not just authentication, but how Windows protects these reusable secrets after login. In this presentation, I'll explain why credential thrift matters and how Credential Guard protects the LSASS using the virtualization and how this connects to the concepts like TCP and the virtual machine security. At first, I want to begin with the basic security issue. Credentials matter because they control identity, privilege, and access. In a Windows or Active Directory environment, identity is power. If an attacker can appear to be a legitimate user, they can access files, service, and remote systems, and sometimes even administrative functions. Research on Kerberos and Active Directory attacks shows that the credential abuse is often the starting point of a much larger compromise across the domain. An important point is that an attacker does not always need the original password. In many real attacks, they steal the password hash, Kerberos ticket, or another reusable authentication artifact that is often enough to act as the victim user. So even if the password is never exposed in text, the attack can still succeed. This connects to our week five's material. The authentication is about providing identity, but stored authentication material becomes a target because it can be reused in attacks. Credential guards tries to reduce the value of that reusable material after login. So the key idea here is the main risk is not just login failure, but post-login credential reuse. Okay, so this slide explains why memory becomes the center of the problem. Microsoft explains that Windows does not need to keep the plain text password after sign in, but it still keeps some authentication material so the session can continue and the service can work normally. This includes the NTLM password hashes and the TGTs. These are extremely valuable because they represent identity in a reusable form. If an attacker can access them, they do not need to crack a password and move directly to the credential abuse. So memory thrift is often more efficient than password cracking. The attacker is not solving the authentication from the outside, but stealing its result from the inside. This is where the LSASS becomes very important. The LSASS is being called the Local Security Authority Subsystem Service. It supports the authentication and relate and sorry related the security functions. As discussed in the LSASS protection paper, this is a highly attractive target because it handles sensitive security data. If it is compromised, the attacker may gain access to powerful authentication material. So while the system is trying to keep the user logged in, it also creates a valuable target in memory. Now we can see why a compromise of LSASS is so dangerous. Research on related attacks shows that once an attacker gains enough privilege on a host, LSASS may provide access to reusable credentials or tickets. This is why tools like Mimikatz are often mentioned in Windows credentials discussions. They provide a practical path from host compromise to identity thrift. But the bigger issue is what happens next. The Carrot's survey explains that stolen tickets and related artifacts can enable attacks such as pass the hash, pass the ticket, privilege escalation persistence, and lateral movement. The active directory attack overview shows how these techniques become part of larger domain attack paths. So the compromise is not limited to one workstation. Once credential material is stolen, the attacker can use that machine as a stepping stone to reach servers, domain controllers, and more sensitive systems. That is why LSAS threat scales across the domain. This problem is not just one compromised machine, but how it becomes a launch point of for the enterprise-wide identity abuse. This is exactly why Windows needs something stronger than normal process operation to protect the credentials. At this point, we need to ask why the normal operating system cannot already solve this problem. The answer is that the traditional OS trust is too broad. In Windows, the Trusted Computing Base, or the TCB, includes a large amount of privileged code, services, and drivers. The Windows Security Analyze lecture points out that the large TCB makes verification and tamper resistance much harder. If one privileged component is compromised, the attacker may gain access to secrets that user mode protections cannot fully define. This is where the XMP paper provides useful support. It argues that the sensitive memory remains exposed if an attacker reaches a sufficient privileged execution context, and the stronger isolation is needed for data like credentials and page tables. This fits our topic well. If credentials remain inside the normal OS trust boundary, the compromise of that boundary can expose them. So even though protections like the DEP and ASLR still matter, they are not enough here. They increase the cost of the exploration, and they do not create a separate protection space for credential material. Okay, so this is the key transition of this presentation. Instead of relying on the normal operating system, Microsoft uses the virtualization-based security, which is the VBS, to redraw the security boundary. The VBS uses a hypervisor to create the protected environment that is separate from the OS. This means the sensitive security functions are no longer exposed inside the same trust domain. We have already saw the hypervisor can isolate the components and reduce the effective size of the trust base. It can also provide stronger boundaries than the normal OS. Credential guard is a example of this idea. The SEC Pod paper supports the same principle. It shows that if the OS is too exposed, the security functions should be moved into a more isolated environment. So the key point is BBS is not just implementation detail, it is what makes stronger trust boundary possible. Okay, so according to Microsoft, the credential guard uses VBS to isolate the important secrets such as the NTLM hashes, Cabots, TGTs, and stored domain credentials. The normal LSASS process still exists and handles the authentication requests, but the most sensitive data is no longer kept directly in the normal OS memory. Instead, it's stored in an isolated LSA environment, often called the LSA ISO. The Ahmed paper describes the same design. The normal LSA communicates with the isolated LSA process that protects the secrets using the virtualization-based security. This makes the attacker's job much harder, even if the host is compromised. The attacker is not automatically inside the same boundary as the credentials. So the credential guard does not just hide the secrets, it changes where they live and who can access them. That is why many credential dumping techniques become less effective. Um, yeah. Okay, so without the credential guard, reusable secrets remain in the normal OS memory. If an attacker reaches the LSA access with enough privilege, they can often dump password hashes or tickets and reuse them. This threat model is well supported in credential thrift research. With the credential guard enabled, the attacker may still compromise the host, but many direct dumping paths become less reliable. The the key secrets are no longer in the same memory space as Microsoft shows. This changes the results of the compromise from the direct access to more restrict and less useful outcomes. So this is a key distinction. Credential guard does not stop every compromise. It changes what the attacker gets after the compromise. If the credential reuse becomes harder, the lecture movement and the domain expansion also become harder. Okay, here I also want to show the credential guard fits a broader research pattern. The SecPod uses virtualization to protect the security functions in separate space. XMP protects the sensitive memory by adding stronger isolation. The Intel XGC takes a hardware-based approach and protects the credential inside the enclaves. Even if the OS is not fully trusted, the the systems are different, but the core idea is the same. If the sensitive data stays exposed to the operating system, then the operating system can expose the data. If the data is isolated behind the stronger boundary, the attack surface becomes smaller and the attackers has fewer options. This also supports the literature review requirement. It shows that the credential guard is not just a single Microsoft feature, but a part of a broader trend, the moving critical secrets into more strong isolated environments. Okay, so although we have already talked a lot before about the credential guard is still not a perfect solution. Microsoft states that it has deployment and compatibility limits. It depends on modern hardware. Um, for protection. It also has restrictions with older protocols such as the NTLM v1 and unconstrained delegation. Microsoft also makes clear that it does not protect every target. For example, it does not protect the Active Directory database and does not solve all SAM-related exposure scenarios. The Ahmed paper supports the same point. He says that the credential guard is a strong mitigation, but not a complete defense. More broadly, credential guard focuses on one specific problem, protecting the reusable authentication material in the OS. It does not stop phishing, social engineering, and misuse of already stolen credentials. So the correct way to describe it is not complete protection, but a strong isolation-based mitigation for one important attack path. Okay, so my final contact slide is about the defense in deeps. Credential guard works best as a part of broader strategy. Microsoft recommends stronger protocols, better administrative separation, and overall system hardening. In other words, this is one layer, not the whole system. Research trends support the same idea. Systems like SecPod, XMP, and Intel SGX shows that the stronger isolation is important, but isolate alone is not enough. Real security still depends on layers like least privilege and secure design. So the final takeaway is simple. Credential guard is does not eliminate all risk, but it raises the cost of the credential theft and reduce the impact of the normal attacks. It is a strong example of how virtualization can create a better trust boundary in modern operating systems. And here is the references. Um, I have one web page from the Microsoft and seven pages, seven different pages over here, and that's all of my presentation. Thank you for watching, and yeah, thank you. Wish you have a good day.